Well, then who did create the heavens and the earth?
Why do you use the word who? You see, you immediately beg the question by using the word who.
Well, then how did it get created?
Well, by a very slow process.
Well, how did it start?
Nobody knows how it started. We know the kind of event that it must have been. We know the sort of event that must have happened for the origin of life.
And what was that?
It was the origin of the first self-replicating molecule.
Right, and how did that happen?
I told you we don't know.
So you have no idea how it started?
No, nor has anybody.
Nor has anyone else. What do you think is the possibility that intelligent design might turn out to be the answer to some issues in genetics or in evolution?
It could come about in the following way. It could be that at some earlier time, somewhere in the universe, a civilization evolved by probably some kind of Darwinian means to a very, very high level of technology and designed a form of life that they seeded onto, perhaps this planet. Now, that is a possibility and an intriguing possibility. And I suppose it's possible that you might find evidence for that if you look at the details of biochemistry, molecular biology. You might find a signature of some sort of designer.
Wait a second. Richard Dawkins thought intelligent design might be a legitimate pursuit?
And that designer could well be a higher intelligence from elsewhere in the universe. Well, but that higher intelligence would itself have had to have come about by some explicable or ultimately explicable process. It couldn't have just jumped into existence spontaneously. That's the point.
So Professor Dawkins was not against intelligent design, just certain types of designers, such as God.
Of course it's counterintuitive that you can get something from nothing. Of course common sense doesn't allow you to get something from nothing. That's why it's interesting. It's got to be interesting in order to give rise to the universe at all. Something pretty mysterious had to give rise to the origin of the universe. The nothing that Lawrence Krauss is talking about, whether or not it's what a naive person would conceive as nothing or what a sophisticated physicist would consider to be nothing, it is going to be something much, much simpler than a creative intelligence.
Something can't come from nothing.
Something can come from nothing, and that's what physicists are now telling us. I've been accustomed to the idea that pushing back from biology into physics, you get back to a zone where we don't understand, and you get back to a zone where there's not nothing, but sort of a primeval simplicity. What I learned from your book, which I find stunningly exciting, is that it is literally nothing. It is literally nothing. It is literally nothing. Of course, common sense doesn't allow you to get something from nothing. That's why it's interesting. It's got to be interesting in order to give rise to the universe at all. Something pretty mysterious had to give rise to the origin of the universe. Something pretty mysterious had to give rise to the origin of the universe. Something pretty mysterious had to give rise to the origin of the universe. It is literally nothing. It is literally something nothing. You can dispute exactly what's meant by nothing, but whatever it is, it's very, very simple. And why is that funny?
Well, I think it's a bit funny to be trying to define nothing.
It is literally nothing.
Well,
you can dispute exactly what's meant by nothing. Something pretty mysterious had to give rise to the origin of the universe. The nothing that Lawrence Krauss is talking about, whether or not it's what a naive person would conceive as nothing or what a sophisticated physicist would consider to be nothing, it is going to be something much, much simpler than a creative intelligence. It is going to be something, it is going to be something, it is going to be something, going to be something, going to be something, going to be something. The nothing that Lawrence Krauss is talking about is going to be something, going to be something, going to be something. It's possible to dispute whether nothing is quite the right word. It is literally nothing. You can dispute exactly what's meant by nothing. Something pretty mysterious had to give rise to the origin of the universe. It is literally nothing. Well, I'm not a philosopher, that'll be obvious. Perhaps you should have invited a philosopher. It is literally nothing. It is going to be something much, much simpler than a creative intelligence.
Dawkins seems to be confused about nothingness as well. He seems to be calling it something.
That's quite right. When you look at Dawkins' statements, he has been taken in by Krauss's use of the word nothing to describe the early condition of the universe. So he says, and I quote, "The nothing Lawrence Krauss is talking about is going to be something much, much simpler than a creative intelligence."
The nothing that Lawrence Krauss is talking about, whether or not it's what a naive person would conceive as nothing or what a sophisticated physicist would consider to be nothing, it is going to be something much, much simpler than a creative intelligence.
Now, that's a self-contradiction, to say that the nothing is something.
The audience picked up on that because they started laughing when he said that, and he said, "Why is that funny?"
Yes, that's right. That comes at the line where he says,
You can dispute exactly what's meant by nothing, but whatever it is, it's very, very simple. And why is that funny?
Whatever it is very, very simple.
Well, I think it's a bit funny to be trying to define nothing.
Well, the audience, as you say, laughs. He says, "Why is that funny?" He doesn't see the point. And yet, it's very clear that nothingness is non-being. That's just not anything, and therefore has no properties, no powers. It doesn't have even simplicity.
Richard, if I said to you, what is the full title of The Origin of Species? I'm sure you could tell me that.
Yes, I could.
Go on then.
On the origin of species, on the origin of species, there is a subtitle with respect to the preservation of favoured races in the fight, in the struggle for
You're
life.
the high pope of Darwinism.
Not bad, actually. I'd give him some justice.
But if you asked people who believed in evolution what that question, and you came back and said 2% got it right, it would terribly easy for me to go, they don't really believe it after all. It's just not fair to ask people these questions.
If you could ask Richard Dawkins one question, what would it be?
On the origin of species, on the origin of species, there is a subtitle with respect to the preservation of favoured races in the fight, in the struggle for life.
You're the high pope of Darwin.
All praise to Richard Dawkins, because he is a godlike figure. You know what I find very, very interesting? That those people who say, "Oh, I hate God and religion," all that stuff, and they make, well, not in a London accent, but they make all these jokes. It's not that they then become very free-thinking, whatever that is. They just bring in another god and another ideology, another liturgy. When poor old Chris Hitchens died, there was a cult of Christopher Hitchens, and the same around Dawkins and Sam Harris and all the rest of them. People listen to their every word. What do they think? What do they think? Well, believe me, they're very fallible. And Richard Dawkins in particular, who is, come on, one of the great public intellectuals of the world. He's enormously well known. He sells probably millions of copies, certainly hundreds of thousands of copies of his book. I'm not sure how many people actually read them, but they certainly do buy them. But now we've found out something rather interesting, that he's very choosy in who he will debate with. And there are all sorts of people who will say, no, they're not worthy, they're not really qualified, which is a euphemism, a smokescreen, a miasma of dishonesty. What he's really saying is, they frighten me. Scott Masson is an academic, teacher, professor, associate pastor at Westminster Chapel and all sorts of things. Great to have you here.
Great to be here, John.
And I suspect that you know all this anyway about Dawkins. We just received an email from the UK that really revealed some information, but he's notorious for this, isn't he?
He is notorious for this. He's publicly ducked leading apologists who've offered to debate him. Yeah. One American apologist in particular went there, and Dawkins declined to debate with him, saying, who is this man? I don't want to give him any profile. Well, he's the leading apologist, at least amongst certain Christians.
By apologist, by the way, we don't mean saying sorry, we mean explaining and justifying.
Rationally justifying the Christian faith. So he would be the ideal man to speak to the issues that Dawkins is addressing.
That person?
I've just forgotten his name.
Is that William Lane Craig?
William Lane Craig, that's
I've interviewed him a couple of times. He's a very impressive man, an author, very clever.
He's highly intelligent, and he's given a great deal of credibility. He's a very good debater, and I think this is the reason that Dawkins ducks him. The other man he's ducking, quite frankly, is this his fellow Oxford professor, John Lennox, who's a professor of mathematics, who Dawkins says is not a scientist because he doesn't hold to the views that Dawkins himself holds to. So because he believes in miracles, Dawkins says this man is not a scientist, he's not worthy of debating.
Ladies and gentlemen, good evening, and can I warmly welcome you to the Sheldonian Theatre this evening for the talk that we're just about to hear, Is God a Delusion? My name's Robbie Strachan. I'm the president of the Christian Union here at Oxford University. And it is a delight to be joined this evening by William Lane Craig, who will just be, in a moment, giving a lecture in response to Richard Dawkins' book, The God Delusion. Now, it would have been great to be able to welcome Professor Richard Dawkins here this evening for public debate. Unfortunately, he wasn't able to make it.
Richard Dawkins didn't show up for that debate at the Sheldonian Theatre last October. There was nothing in his place but an empty chair. But since he wasn't there in his place, we decided to get a panel of 3 Oxford professors to respond to my talk instead. We had a good time, but having watched the Republican National Convention last month, I now realize that I missed my chance that night at the Sheldonian Theatre through the magic of Eastwooding. That empty chair would have sufficed very nicely for a dialogue with Professor Richard Dawkins. So, if I might invite the staff to bring out a chair for Professor Dawkins. Thank you. Welcome to Watermark, Professor Dawkins. I am delighted that we can find... Now, calm down. Well, you don't have to shake my hand. You don't really even have to be on the same stage with me. That's one of the great things about Eastwooding. Yes, I know you don't want to, but you don't have any choice. You're being Eastwooded. Well, there are 2 kinds of people in the world, my friend. Those who show up and those who get Eastwooded. You get Eastwooded.
It's funny you should mention that, because I want to talk to you about a particular scientist who does some philosophy of science in his book, and I have heard you say there are few things more simple than Richard Dawkins' God Delusion.
Yeah, no, as I said, makes me ashamed to be an atheist, I think was the phrase I used.
What do you mean by that? In what way is it simple or simplistic?
Well, I think it's not simple, it's simplistic. I mean, there's nothing wrong with KISS, keep it simple, stupid. I mean, one of the virtues of science is simplicity. The trouble with Dawkins, I mean, you know, maybe this is envy. The guy sold 3 million copies of the book. I wish I'd sold 3 million copies of one of my books. I mean, the trouble is, he just doesn't take the things that he's talking about seriously. Now, I defer to nobody in my admiration for Dawkins' book, The Selfish Gene, which he published 30 years ago, about the nature of genetics. Now, I don't care whether you agree with the book or not, but it seems to me that that is a serious attempt to understand aspects of the nature of biology. Now, if somebody comes along, and a woman called Mary Midgley did just this, and comes in and says, oh, well, that must be stupid because genes can't be selfish, I think Dawkins has got every right at this point to say, hang on a minute, I know that. I'm using a metaphor. Look at what I'm trying to do with this metaphor and see. Now, you may disagree with what I'm trying to do, but at least try to understand what's going on. I think Dawkins has a perfectly legitimate case there. Now, I want to say equally that I think the theologian or the religious person or the philosopher, and to a certain extent this is a turf war, I think that they have equal right to turn to Dawkins and say, look, if you're going to criticize this stuff, fair enough, but try to make an effort to understand what the position is.